Welcome, everybody, to the Evolution Security Podcast. Now, this is a very special episode, and it is a milestone for us, which it is the 100th episode. We're really excited about that, and we've, of course, got a special episode because of that. Now, we're proud that we have a lot of content that is not your typical content on, gun shows, martial arts shows, etc. Lots of talk about music. Our favorite musicians have been on here. We talk music and food and all kinds of fun stuff with our guests to bring out, those personal things that are a lot of fun and not just talk about shooting people, but when it comes down to it, our focus of a show has definitely been training, living that life of getting better at protecting yourself, your family, living a life of being healthier because of exercise, weightlifting, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, the whole bag that creates a well-rounded individual. But again, since our focus is really training, we couldn't think of a better way to have our 100th episode than to have our most important mentors on, Mr. Mike Brown and Craig Douglas. Thanks for coming on, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Well, for the audience out there, we've had both Craig and Mike on two other opportunities, so we're not going to go deep into their backgrounds because we have those episodes number 5 and 45 for Mike and 13 and 49 for Craig. I'll put those in the show notes so you can get a little more deep into their backgrounds. But with that said, guys, if I could ask you guys for a quick bio. Mike, let's start with you, buddy.
Sure. I was a Tulsa police officer for about 22 years. I finished up there and worked very briefly in the private sector, and then came to work as an instructor for a high school criminal justice program now, where I teach for a tech center, and our goal is to get juniors and seniors in high school who want to be police officers some training and certifications that allow them to move on in their careers.
Excellent. And Mike is also a very accomplished shooter, IDPA, a national champion, multiple masterclass ratings, and he was one of our most important pistol instructors over the years. So, and he also is a black belt in jiu-jitsu under Higa Machado, correct, Mike? Am I correct?
Machado.
Oh, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. But yes, a very accomplished person and has helped us out greatly. Craig, what you got, buddy? Quick bio.
Quick bio. So, like Michael, retired police officer, was on the job from 1990 to 2011. Retired in 2011 to do training full time. This is my 12th year this year of doing training full time. It's my 21st year conducting training and premiering products from a little company called Shivworks, and we cover now 48 states, 11 countries outside of the U.S., all 4 branches of the U.S. military, several, 5 or 6, I think, federal law enforcement agencies. And we have a standing contract in the intelligence community. We specialize mainly in niche tactical problems. What does a gunfight in a clinch on the ground look like, or in a car? Knife work, solo structure movement problems, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get deeper into that. I mean, the materials changed a lot of people's lives, and we are certainly the recipients of that as well, Craig. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So essentially what I would like to do is kind of talk a little bit about how Mike and I met and how that developed into how Mike pushed us in other areas, and we'll just kind of go down that road a little bit. Mike, it's funny. You've probably heard this story way too many times, but I still have to tell it.
Sure.
You know, the first time that I met Mike was at Gibson's Martial Arts, and there was, I guess, we had Thai boxing class and grappling class. They were back to back. So Mike and I were in Thai boxing class together, and then we moved into the grappling class, which is kind of a mixture of, certainly jiu-jitsu was involved, some catch wrestling, you know, a lot of blended C-lot, so on and so forth, but you know, just not practice the way that we practice jiu-jitsu today. But nonetheless, we came to sparring, and Mike and I are rolling, and you know, again, I always tell it this way. You know, I thought at that point I was okay. You know, I really wasn't. But nonetheless, even with that, I'm rolling with Mike, and I could not touch Mike. You know, and I'm like, man, where this guy's done this before somewhere. And I asked Mike, I said, Mike, what's your background in grappling? And he said, you know, oh, I was a Div 1 wrestler at Cornell. And so I'm like, well, that explains it. It also explained a lot of your, you know, your motivation in training and other avenues. But man, I tell you, that meeting that day really started a relationship that was so important to both myself and Aaron. And man, I just appreciate that, buddy.
Man, likewise. I still remember it like it was
Yeah,
yesterday.
And then again, that's where you and did you and Brandon meet at Gibson's?
That's where Brandon and I met as well. Yeah, a lot of my long-term friendship started at that same place.
Yeah, Brandon
Aaron
was
Whitaker and Brandon and so many other people, and you guys. I mean, just a lot of that, you know, that practical martial arts community in Tulsa all started at my coach Christian Durer, you know, right now, and so many other training partners just started at the same place.
Well, is Darian, is he training out there now too, or
Yeah,
he was at some point
at 6 a.m.
So Darian trains with you. Okay, man, tell him hello.
Becky saw him. I guess she didn't talk to him. But yeah, we didn't know he was out at your place, man. That's awesome. Good to hear.
Yep, just got his blue belt.
Oh,
cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool. I got to make sure I tell Becky.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, you know, Mike, the other thing that you always had done, of course, you were Aaron and our main pistol coach for many years, and of course, we used to train together out at Oil Capital, like we mentioned pre-show. But the other thing that I think was very, very important in what you helped us with is you pointed us in the right direction. And one of those directions, incidentally, I'm kind of digress a minute. You first introduced me to Straight Blast Gym, and did I tell you that I went out to Straight Blast Gym headquarters and took Paul Sharp's MDoc, and it was cool. I got to speak with Matt Thornton about his influence and how I used to use his videotapes to teach the combatives classes at my unit. He was pretty fascinated by that.
Yeah,
he's
kind of a circle of life thing.
Absolutely. Matt Dude's a tall individual, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. Like 6'7", something like that. Yeah.
And then you pushed me. You said, hey, you know, the next step, number one, you need to get on TPI. And the first chance you get, you need to get into Craig Douglas's Shivworks. Excuse me, ECQC. Goodness, Freudian slip there. And that whole TPI experience is what led me to training with Craig. So again, you're talking about these circles and how that all developed. And Craig, that brings you into the picture. Again, I guess it was 2010. I took ECQC for the first time, and Cecil was the host, and he was also in the class. And again, the relationship we're developing with Cecil, it's pretty amazing how these things come about. Matter of fact, I don't know if you knew this or not, but he's teaching here in North Carolina at it's the beginning of February. I'm gonna go out there. I'm honored. He asked me to help AI, so I'm pretty pumped
Very cool.
about that.
Awesome.
So, can you talk about how TPI developed and I guess some of the relationships that developed out of that for you and what it's done for you today? I know it's kind of you've moved on from that. I mean, most people are, but would you say that the TPI community and how it brought together guys like Mike and Brandon, how that shaped you as well?
Yeah, that whole time period is interesting. So to answer your question specifically, TPI, or Total Protection Interactive, was an internet forum that I created in 2005 after another internet forum called Self Defense Forums, which was active from '02 to probably '08, pretty much imploded. And there was like many of these internet communities, cliques and schisms and things developed. And a bunch of us just went south with the owner of that forum. So we kind of said, fuck you, we're going to go create our own forum. And that's what we did. And that was Total Protection Interactive. And I footed the bill, for the server and the software. And we created that forum. And that's kind of where all things Shivworks and Praesidium group and everything that was active at the time. We just all kind of found each other, and we're running our own independent laboratories and classes, and coming back and talking about what we were doing. It was an interesting time period. There was a lot of growth with my own coursework, more and more long-term friendships. A lot of the same people, Michael, Chris LeBlanc, people like that. I'm still friends with here, 20 years later. So, but yeah, it was an interesting time period in that a lot of things. And speaking of my own coursework, there hasn't been a lot of growth probably in the past 7-8 years. There's been a lot of polishing, but nothing really significant doctrinally, or even as far as tactics or techniques. That hasn't changed that much. So, but that first few years, ECQC and how I did things changed a lot. I mean, it was new like every 6 months, so I was constantly discovering and, seeing what worked and what didn't. And because I'd gotten on the road in 2003 was the first open enrollment class I taught. And that was a knife class, an edged weapons overview in California. And then I started teaching ECQCs. There were one-day classes. In 2004, Michael came to one of those. So that's 20 calendar years ago. I mean, if we go by the year that I first taught,
wow,
where that time went.
Right.
Yeah.
For all of us.
But it was just a lot of growth, and it was probably, it was very exciting. We were constantly trying to figure out what worked, and not only what worked, but what fit, and how to make something digestible, cogent, consistent to where it turned into an actual program of instruction versus an Inosanto seminar, and that's what it is today, and it's fairly polished today. But those early years were crucial, and TPI, acted as kind of a sounding board for all of us, because no one was above reproach. Everyone got questioned, and also it was one of the few places on the internet where that seemed to have forum members who regularly met. And I think that contributed a lot to everybody being nice and respectful, and being able to disagree without being disagreeable. And if it was disagreeable, it's usually somebody we didn't know. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, and guys with private messages like, do you know this guy? You know, have you met this guy? Because, you know, with the heavy hitters on that board, there was maybe a degree of separation. So I think there, in those early days, there was a lot of, you know, it was almost like a bunch of, you know, if I were to go back to the 80s and 90s, it was almost like a 24-hour available anytime you wanted to conference call with a bunch of your buddies, you know. So it had that feel to it. I think the most we had was 5,000 or 6,000 members. I mean, it wasn't huge, you know. It was never meant to be. But yeah, those days were pretty critical. So we, you know, the forum is technically still active, but I haven't taken it down. But no one's posted there. I mean, people have kind of moved on more or less from internet forums. There are a couple here. I think Pistol Forum is one I still post on. But other than that, I think most everybody's in a social media group of some type these days.
Well, and you know, I'll ask both you guys this. I personally, you know, Aaron and I, we've kind of been training junkies the last handful of years, and that was a big part of why we even started EvoSec, was, you know, for our benefit, not being selfish, but it was a avenue for us to do more of it. But one of the things that I certainly, and Aaron's going to hit on this here in a second, and we spoke with Tom Gibbons about this recently, and several other mentors of ours, where it does seem like we may very well be in the best of times, training wise, because of the proliferation of information. And I think, frankly, what has birthed from TPI, other forums that had valuable intercourse. But I'll ask you guys this way: do we think that with the movement towards social media, do we think that folks are losing out, that there aren't avenues like TPI anymore? I'll ask you that first, Mike, and then Craig, if you can follow up on that.
I think, you know, it's simply a different form of either good information or bad information. I don't think that really the medium that we're using is any more or less effective than it's ever been. The real issue, and this will never go away. This will be an issue. You know, and it's funny because there are always guys, like right now, there's a couple of people out there really trying to differentiate, you know, trying to separate wheat from chaff in terms of good training, bad training. I mean, people who I really like and I watch, and, you know, and I love to absorb what they have to say. But what I do kind of say in the back of my mind is, you're going to be having the same problem 20 years from now. This is never going to go away. There will always be groups of people who know, and then groups of people who think they know. And the real differentiator between the groups of people that know and don't know are, first of all, you know, being willing to do the work. That's number one. Now, fortunately, that's somewhat increased over time. It's become a little bit more popular to be someone doing the work.
Agreed. Yeah.
But the next piece, and this is the piece that that I strongly credit Craig with, you know, with I don't know if creating is the right word for it or not, but it's the critical analysis. You know, the critical analysis of what it is we're doing. And, you know, he really started the idea that we are going to go work from the problem forward. You know, for a long time in the training industry, we took solutions that we already had and then tried to fit them to problems. And Craig's viewpoint was entirely different from that. He can probably tell you a little bit about how he arrived there, because I'm sure, like everybody else who has a martial arts background or anything like that, we always have solutions we try to apply to problems. And I think at some point Craig realized, nah, that's not going to work. What we've got to do is we've got to figure out what the problem is and then work our way and reverse engineer that from there, rather than trying to take the current set of techniques we have. I mean, there are some phenomenal martial artists that we all know and like and respect, but that still don't quite get that. That still say, well, I can make jujitsu work for this, or I can make silat or boxing or Muay Thai work for that. And all of those wind up being perfectly effective delivery systems for the problems that we find ourselves in. But it doesn't change the fact that if what we're training for is in fact personal protection, we have to start at what the problem is. And now that problem can be varied. That problem is entirely different for a woman who walks to her car alone. That problem is entirely different from me, as a person who works unarmed most of the day now, as a person who, an individual who works in a police or a military environment. I mean, so really the ability to critically analyze your problem and then move solutions forward is really what Craig brought to the table that no one, and they can say that they were doing it, it's not true. Craig was the first one that was doing this. He was the one that was most effective at it. There are a few other people who have started doing it since, but he's the guy who deserves credit for starting that process, and certainly starting me on that process.
And all of us have benefited for certain. For certain. Good answer, Mike. Craig, your thoughts on that?
On if we're losing anything from the loss of forums and the switch over to social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I don't know if we're losing anything. It's different, Information is more readily available than it's ever been, in particular video. Here's what's interesting. One of the things that catapulted the growth of TPI and me into greater and greater, a larger sphere of influence was my willingness to take still photos of me paused in action sequences and write a little bit of text and post those on an internet forum. That just became, that old thing that a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea of a photographic scenario progression. And honestly, and that wasn't particularly inspired. I just suck at typing, and people were asking me more and more questions about things, like really technical questions that it was going to take me a long time to fucking type. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I grabbed one of my guys, one of the agents in the office, David Pappas, a narcotics agent. I said, hey man, come to the break room. I gotta this is gonna sound weird, but I'm gonna like take photos of me like beating you up, and I want you to do certain things. He's like, okay. Well, I did that. I took like 3 or 4 photos, and again, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Post a little bit of text, and people just went fucking nuts, and they started asking for more of those. It's like, okay. So it's taking more and more and more time, but I was enjoying it, and it was an exercise in creativity and art and communication that I was kind of flexing a new muscle on, right? So my writing got a little bit better, and my photo skills got a little bit better, and I was creating and answering these questions, and it really just kind of, I don't know, man, people started coming to TPI more and more. So my point in saying that is now we have video and YouTube, and people can upload things from their phone. They don't have to have a camera with a 3x5 floppy like I did in 2001. So I think the opportunity to learn is just through the roof. I mean, I'm sure we see kids with a modicum of BJJ experience learning like high level techniques that they'll go in and try, in BJJ. And I think probably, BJJ fanatics and everything online,
Oh yeah.
certainly contributes, that BJJ daycare certainly contributes to the level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the United States now. I mean, it's everywhere. So I think we're in a good place for that. Now, as far as the tactical industry goes, what I see with social media is people seem to think that production values equals technical competence or experience. And that's simply not true. There's an Travis Haley and Chris Costa forever changed our expectations of production values in video, when they did those Magpul DVDs right back in the day, and all of a sudden now, what we used to accept as okay, shit from Panther Productions, that Michael and I used to watch when we were kids, VHS cassettes,
Oh yeah.
a background kind of like this, a fucking solid wall, and Paul Vunak or whatever playing bongos and beating some dude up, with one camera, right? The camera never even switched pan. That's totally not acceptable. So the production values have gotten to be more and more and more just more Hollywood like. And that brings with it followers, and the more followers, the more influence, and all of a sudden, that's what we see driving people to how they make their choices in training. If somebody sounds reasonably competent, has good production values, then they can be successful, and they can be arguably more successful than somebody who has experience and is a vetted, vested, tenured instructor. So, good and bad, man. But I don't think we lost anything. I would agree with Michael. I think it's just different. I think probably more than any other time, it's really buyer beware. It really is, especially for the uninitiated. It's easy to look at a video on YouTube where a sim gun is thrown into the dirt and two guys fight over it, and it's a well-cut action sequence, and believe that that is a program of instruction that is as well developed as ECQC, and it's not.
Yeah. So Craig, you kind of started talking about the next question I had, which was, there's all this amazing information, and there's always been the question of, am I seeking out the right instruction? Do I really know, like Mike said, the people that do know and the people that don't know? Do you think it's even harder for people to separate what's good from what's bad because of there's still quite a bit of a filtering that happens, at least that I see? But what are your guys' thoughts on that when it comes to, is it harder for people to find the good stuff, or is it still the same?
See, I don't think it's ever going to change.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be like I said, I think it's going to be the same problem 20 years from now that it is today, that it was for us 20 years ago. It's simply a matter of there will always be people, and this is not to say that everybody that, Craig's example was perfect, of this idea of, we throw a sim gun in the dirt, and then we have a program of instruction that's supposed to be equal to ECQC, and it's simply not. is that most people just don't know what they're looking at the majority of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like when for instance, as an example, jiu-jitsu has been a passion of mine for 2 decades. My dad still asks how taekwondo is going. You know, so it's just I think that's just the way it is. And that's an extreme example of that sort of thing. But I think that the ability to separate and, most importantly, critically analyze material is just going to be the province of a few.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether you will get that few or not, sometimes in all honesty, I think is probably more a matter of good fortune than any real legitimate research you can do. Because I think that if one of the, when we asked a little earlier about whether things have gotten better or worse with the forums compared to social media, the thing that obviously the technology and, like, Craig talked about the idea of these photo sequences compared to video now, obviously that's much, much better. But today, if you post a question in a forum, or on social media, depending on the location where you post it, if you post in a specialized group or a general population group or whatever, and you say, I'm looking for some pistol training or whatever, that can mean so many different things. There's half a dozen probable tracks you could be looking at in terms of what that really means. Then combine that with so if somebody does manage to identify the correct track that you're looking for, what are the odds they're going to provide you with an optimal instructor for such a track? And so I think that there's a lot of times you're just lucky. I count myself among those people.
Oh, yeah.
I probably had better critical analysis skills than most, but the reality is that I was just fortunate to stumble upon Craig Douglas. I could have very easily been, clacking sticks and defanging snakes and things like that. I mean, so I was just, like I said, I was fortunate. There were some things that directed me and that sent me in that direction. But like I said, it was just a lot of it was good fortune. And I don't know that you would necessarily be able to find that because, like Craig mentioned a little earlier, the equation of good production value with knowledge is just not the same. And there's a lot of people out there with really good production value that may or may not have anything real to contribute to the discussion.
Yeah, the congruency is not there in many cases. I will tell you, I was interested in asking you guys that question because it's been, for lack of a better term, an anecdotal observation on my part is that I love TPI. What I gained from it was part of who I am. However, I still, as much as I miss it, I do see that it's a different medium. Like you're talking about art, Craig. TPI is a medium, like we used to say in art. Social media is a medium, same with video, and it does still seem like maybe still like the adage that there's probably about 20,000 people that really train, and maybe you're probably right, Craig. And definitely not in our kind of circle.
I think Tom, I believe Tom probably has more accurate numbers. I think Tom says there are probably 4,000 to 5,000 people that we all kind of take money from and who actually train, that continue to pay, over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah, I don't think it's that big at all. I really don't. I would not. Mm-mm, I don't think so.
Yeah, and you're probably right, Craig. And that 20,000 is a number that I've heard kicked around in a couple of venues. I think the main, if I can try to make the point this way, there's still a collective of individuals that's fine, that's pretty much finite, and it's kind of fixed. It is probably the best way to put it. And regardless of the forum, if it be TPI, if it be some of the other forums that had been there, 20 years ago versus what's there now, it's still gathering around the same amount of people. And I guess that's what my point was that we still kind of see that same group. Yeah. And I just wanted to know if you guys felt that way before, providing my definitely less informed and less, just less informed opinion, I should say.
Well,
and I
there may be 20,000 people who train. That doesn't mean we get along with them. And it
Good point. Good point.
It doesn't mean that what we think they're doing is worthwhile. I mean, hell, look at TPI. There are plenty of people who are like, nah, dude, you're fucking silly.
Yeah.
And you can bang sticks or do Krav Make America Great Again all fucking day long, and we're not going to agree with you. We think that's silly, and we want you to come out here in the dirt with this T-gun and show us. That group was so fucking small. It still is, really. It still is. I mean, it's bigger than it's ever been, but I mean, compared to, TAC handgun 101, 200, fucking 2-day, whatever, I mean, it'll never be that. It won't be. It works too hard.
Yeah. And you have to put your ego, your fitness, your, what have you on the line, and most are not interested in that. That's for sure.
Most people just aren't that into it. I mean, how many people train on a regular basis with the fire extinguisher in their home?
Not very many at all.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, to a lot of people, a gun, they give it about the same amount of thought as a fire extinguisher in their home. That's the vast majority of gun owners.
Yeah.
And then occasionally you have people who, want a CCW for when they want to carry a gun, when they think they might need it, and then you have a few people here and there who had close calls and they carry guns on a regular basis. You have some people who are actually victims, who it's very serious for them. You have some police officers who actually, have been in situations that were life or death, and they believe in it. But man, that's a tiny number. It really is, dude. It's a tiny number. So,
well, go ahead, Aaron.
Eric, finish your thought, because I think I was going to move on to the next topic germane to that, but go ahead.
Well, I just think that number one, I mean, and actually, Craig, you brought something to my attention that made me think about it. I mean, I think you guys would agree that, if you continue to train, you take classes, even if it just be firearms classes, ECQCs, forms of combatives, the one thing that occurs to me over and over again is, number one, how much I don't know, how much I need to keep working on. And number two, I support everybody's right to carry a gun, right? 100%. I don't think they should have to be required to take training. But what I think about when I think about all of my training partners and folks that are serious about it, and even what we've done training wise ourselves, I get concerned. Like, man, I get concerned about, if I didn't have at least some modicum of training, it concerns us. Like, man, there are folks out there that just don't, like you said, they don't put forth the thought. And I'm like, I'm just so thankful that I've had some good guidance in that area. I don't know.
believe in the Constitution, and I certainly am pro 2A. I'm from the deep South, have very conservative and Christian roots. So let me put all that out there before I get castigated by the internet for what I'm getting ready to say. I don't necessarily support everybody's right to carry a gun, because there are a lot of people I know that shouldn't have driver's licenses, much less carry firearms. I am very aware that the right to bear arms is enshrined in the Bill of Rights. I'm very aware of that. But also, I'm perfectly okay with living, and the paradox that I live in, where I have two opposing points of view that I'm perfectly okay with. That's just human nature, and I don't support everybody being able to carry a gun. I don't.
That's a very good point, Craig. Well put. Yep.
Well, so guys, this is interesting. This is maybe, I wouldn't say it's the other side of the coin, but maybe so. You guys both, Mike and Craig, you're both, of course, well known for having expertise and have done plenty of instruction in the interdisciplinary fighting systems, firearms, and combatives. Craig, as we've talked about with Mike stating that you've been a pioneer in this type of instruction and material and getting a lot of people in your human laboratories. Mike, I know you have amazing experience in the same types of material, but this day and age, it seems like there are a lot of, at least a handful of pretty good instructors out there that they're kind of doing their side thing too. Like for instance, Eric and I, it was real nice. We were invited to take Cliff Byerly's The Complete Combatants course in March. We had a blast.
Excellent.
There were definitely some, because what works, right? So all of you guys teach a lot of stuff that can be similar, and we've seen some of it before, but then he had us take and on a lot of other things that was different. But that's one good example. But what are your guys' thoughts on the availability of quality training in this interdisciplinary realm, knowing that what we've said, it can be hard for the individual to find really good training? What are you guys' thoughts on the industry and then or that realm and the availability of quality training, let's just say, besides yourselves?
Well, I think that we have to make some ground rules about what we're talking about here.
Okay.
Because I think that we kind of throw the term training around to mean everything.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to distinguish what we're talking about when we talk about training. Because as Craig mentioned before, there's a core group of about, what you think we said, about 4,000 or 5,000 people that are continually paying to come to, various people's courses. And so if we take that group, how many of them are truly making measurable improvement class to class? Where you can take someone and they take, I don't know, for sake of discussion, they take Kyle DeFore's first, second, and third classes. Does that person at the end of class one, are they really multiple levels ahead when they take class three? And that's nothing about Kyle DeFore in particular. He was the first one that came to mind because I know he's got several levels of class. And then, throw in, someone who says, okay, today I'm going to take Kyle DeFore, and then I'm going to go to Kyle Lamb, and then I'm going to go to, so, just going to go to all these different classes. But then in between, they don't really do much because they spend all their time going to these different classes. And so what I kind of regard the 2 day the 2 day model, the weekend model that's most popular in the industry, is that's more education than it is training. Training is what you do on a daily or regular basis. Training is going and getting to the gym 5 days a week. Training is going to BJJ every afternoon or morning. Training is your dry practice. Training is your range practice. That's what I guess I regard as training. But the nice thing about training is, even without truly expert guidance, you can move a long way. Even without. Now you add in, a pretty good guide, and man, your progress can be extraordinary with a tremendous amount of effort. And I think that frequently, people going from class to class does not necessarily equate with the amount of effort they put into truly mastering the skills that they teach at, that they take at those. I was one of those who, and my situation is a little bit different. You could, when you hear Craig has always had the intent to provide instruction. And man, thank God for that, because there were people like me who were teaching only because we didn't know a Craig. There was no, if I could have found ECQC first off, I never would have taught a single class, because it would have been all I would have been interested in doing. As soon as I started going to Craig's classes, I was spending an extraordinary amount of time just working the material on my own, because that was my real interest. My real interest was performance. And, so really the accessibility of training is as good as it's ever been. But without, the willingness to put that level of work in yourself, it almost doesn't really matter how accessible the training is. Because if you're going to go to the weekend class and then that's just what you're going to do until the next year that instructor comes back, or the next 6 months when the instructor comes back, I'm not sure you really got out of it what you really could have.
Well, Mike, if I can add something to that, and folks, had their different opinions about James Yeager. May he rest in peace. Unfortunately, passed away this last year. But one of the things, I learned a lot from James when I trained out there. But one of the things that I say fairly often regarding that subject is he would say, when you come to a class, you're making a down payment, but when you go home, you got to make payments on it. And I mean, just a layman's way of looking at it. I honestly always liked that. But yeah, Craig, your thoughts on that?
On what's the original question?
Aaron's question about the quality of instruction in specifically the interdisciplinary realm of training.
To piggyback on what Mike said, I agree that you're not going to get good, unless you put in flight time outside of a 2-day class. One thing I'll remark on that he didn't mention, I'm not sure a lot of people who come to these classes are that driven to get better. And what I see is that for a lot of people, training is very social. Mm-hmm. It's just something they like to do. They're not driven by a desire to get better. What I've realized about everything I do, apparently, and again, I didn't set up to make it this way. It was just me following, life's a dope deal. That's my fucking motto. And that's how I run my business. I don't think a whole lot about it. Hashtag lad, it's a dope deal. If it feels good, I do it. If it doesn't feel good, I don't. And I run my business that way. So I didn't have the foresight to do this. But what I've realized is that all Shivworks coursework, they are courses of instruction, but they're also experiences.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think a lot of people come back for the experience. They come back. I had a really interesting email from a guy yesterday as I was flying back from Columbus, Ohio, and in the email he said, one of the reasons he thinks people, himself included, keep coming back is because they feel like they're dying in front of people. It's horrendous, and they come back from it and they don't, and they're elated. They have this powerful, just emotional experience. All these other people share this too. I mean, besides the course of instruction, I guess the experiences, to some extent, I inflict trauma on people in a fairly positive, affirming way that's shared, and it creates there's this visceral effect that comes from it, and people want to come back to it, and do it again and do it again and do it again and see the people they did it with, and I'm not sure they're thinking about how much better their grappling is. So that's the first thing I'll comment on is that right there. And the second thing, as far as people outside of me and Michael, well, here's what I would say. If he doesn't know them, or I don't know them, or Cliff Byerly doesn't know them, I'm not sure they're worth training with. Because at this point, it's still fairly small, And at this point, regardless of who else is out there, I travel more than any of them. And I teach more than any of them. Nobody travels 40 weeks a year with a box of sim guns. So, and I know who's out there teaching. And if I've never heard of them, I'll ask somebody, you heard of this guy? And no, I hadn't heard of him. And I'll ask somebody else. And if somebody in my peer group, first tier, immediate, innermost ring of Saturn, has not heard, I have various concentric rings, around Saturn, around me, that I can ask. And if I haven't heard of that person, no one I know has heard of that person. And I know that's a fairly that could be perceived as an egotistical thing to say. Probably is. But I know what I've done, and I know what I do, and I know who's out there, and I know who's not out there, and I know who's got original content, and I know who's kind of Xeroxing Shivworks stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you're bringing up a thought to my mind, is that it still comes back to the student, the types of students that you see. There's, like anything, right? We have a large enough population sample, we can see the bell curve with them all, right? You've got a handful of people that are really there to get good. There's some people that got drugged there, and really didn't want to be there. But then there's everybody else that's in there. And I think you're saying that you still wish that they would realize, even though they're coming to your course, that they really need to focus on this material, getting better at it, and not just keep coming to your courses. Am I just totally missing that? But that's just the first thought that comes to mind, and it's because I think back to my college experience. I didn't go to an Ivy League college, but I've done really well at the college, the couple of colleges that I went to, because I put a shit ton of time into it. And it's one of those things that you get out of it what you put into it. Am I making any sense?
You are, but again, Aaron, I'm not sure I agree. I am blessed and fortunate to be able to do what I do for a living. I don't suffer employment, so I'm very careful about this, because the last thing I'm going to do is tell someone what they need to do after they spend a weekend and a lot of money with me, unless they ask. If they ask me, what do you think I should do? I'll tell them, I think you need to lose weight. And I'll be honest with them. I think you need to go to jiu-jitsu. I think you need to go work at a homeless shelter or an autism camp because your social literacy sucks. I'll tell them that. But, far be it for me to have the hubris to tell somebody what they need to do with their life when they leave my class. I'm not a fucking life coach. I'm an intensely flawed human being struggling for grace, just like everybody else. And just because I do something well doesn't mean I'm good at life, and it doesn't mean I'm a good person. It doesn't mean and I certainly don't need to be canonized. So I'm really careful about telling what people how they need to take my training. Some people I'll never see again. Other people, they want to dive into the art of it. Some people, it's the community. Wow. Yeah, they don't, when they come back and see me the third or fourth year in a row, they're not interested in making their hip escape better. They say, fuck man, these are the best people I know. And I look forward to seeing them every fucking year. And as long as you come back close to me, I'll always come. And that person may not have a better hip escape, the fourth time they do ECQC. They may not.
But so what you're saying there is that is just as valid of a reason to show up to your course as someone that is just so intense on getting better every time. That's cool, because I mean that is what you're saying, right?
For community and fellowship and goodwill and a safe place to experience violence, yeah. That's as good a reason as any. And if they don't get better, that's up to them. I'm not going to be disappointed. You take my training however you want to.
I think the libertarian perspective on that is kind of refreshing to the idea that you can do what you want. I mean, it doesn't impact me. The only place I take issue with that ever is that as long as we're not deceiving ourselves.
Yeah.
As long as we're not deceiving ourselves, and I think that's an area that the training community went, or I shouldn't say the training community. I shouldn't say the training community. The martial arts community, the shooting community, everybody that was not auditing their own material was going that way. And that was, it's interesting, we have these discussions because the thing that was most important to me in my very first ECQC experience was that, you realize there are certain places that you are woefully inadequate. And that was really, and that was the emphasis of the first several Shivworks classes that I took. I would be again, I don't like to, just like Craig, I don't say what's good for everybody, but the reality is, I think just most of the people that I took that class with, took that series of classes with, we're all taking them with the goal of realizing, man, there's something here I'm not doing, and I've got to see what it is. Now that has evolved over time because I think we understand the formula a little bit better now today. I haven't actually taken a Shivworks class in a long time, but when I watch the material, whether it be through John Lovell's network or anything like that, the material and the delivery is pretty similar. As Craig mentioned earlier, there's not a bunch of new techniques they're doing. There's a lot of polish on the delivery. That's the real change that has occurred. But going back to what we were saying is that as long as we're not deceiving ourselves into thinking we're getting better every time we write this check or whatever, then I think that's okay. What we don't want to do is affirm people that they're okay in terms of their ability to protect themselves and their loved ones and things like that, when they may or may not be.
Yes.
Because I think that's the real thing that, I have to presume that's the reason people come to us. Now, when I teach jujitsu, there are people there who say, man, I just come, this is where my friends are. That's cool too. As long as you don't interfere with the people that are trying to get better. As long as your willingness to desire to socialize doesn't, keep you from practicing when other people are. Yeah. Well, it's not for me to tell anybody else what they should do, but we just don't want to deceive ourselves into thinking that our social time is training time at the
100%.
same time, or that, or that just by virtue of my attendance here, I have now, I have now become the person that Craig Douglas is, or somehow Vulcan mind melded his knowledge into me.
Well, and Craig and Mike, kind of riding off what you guys are speaking on. One of the things that I keyed in on, Craig, I first started training with you, as I mentioned, 2010, and been a multi-time alum since then. But what Mike said about the polishing piece, yeah, there very little has changed from that first time, but most assuredly, I agree that the polishing, Aaron's mentioned that as well, spot on. But one of the things that you also said, and it brought to my thoughts of every single time I took ECQC or EWO, is that leading up to, I was like, now, why am I doing this again? And it's because, and I knew I was excited, but then as it got closer, it's like, okay, here we go again. It's time for these experiences that some of it's not going to be as fun. I'm going to have to face a lot of myself. But then you also said something that was exactly the word I use. After it's done, you're elated. And the amount of growth that you have both mentally and then the friendships is hard to beat. But yeah, because you said that, I was like, yep, every single time I would go in saying, okay, why am I doing this again? But I know why. But I still would ask myself that mentally, Craig. I don't know if I've ever told you that. And my guess is that a lot of your multi-time alum probably feel the same.
Yeah, I mean the guy. In fact, I'm sitting here reading the email now from the guy this past weekend, and it's really cogent because what he says here. Why do we come back and engage in this deeply uncomfortable, emotionally threatening business to fail and die in front of strangers? You know. Um, and it's the opportunity, as he says, to kill his inner bitch. You know,
Oh, I love
it's an
it.
opportunity. It's an opportunity to wrestle with himself. Um, and it's funny because he says right here, because I paired him up with two really good BJJ black belts. He's a purple belt. He's done coursework with me before, and I paired him against two BJJ black belts. And he says, uh, I realized when you gave me Brian and Sam that I would in all likelihood end up on the ground eating shit if they were even putting like 50% into it. And per usual, the bitch was already giving me excuses. They're bigger, stronger, faster, more skilled, intimately familiar with the material, so on and so forth. But for whatever reason, I was able to make a volitional act that whatever the outcome, I was just going to provide maximum output directed at the goals you gave us. Drag race to the knife, stay on your feet, stab punch as hard as you can until either my body failed or I heard break. The situation may not yield to my will, but I will commit to it fully, irrespective of outcome. I will not quit or disengage. I will not withdraw from my heart. I will not withdraw my heart from the enterprise. For me, this is the ritualistic killing of the bitch. I think that's pretty. It's interesting that he sent me that email in time for that question because
That's
I really
awesome.
think that I really think that's why a lot of people come back. I think he phrased that very well, and it's timely correspondence from an alumni, right? I mean, why do
Oh,
you guys fucking do it? Why do you come back and see me? Why do you do it? Right?
yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you read that, Craig, because I think that can help a lot of people. And
Yeah.
boy,
Excellent.
if most of us don't identify with it, when he mentioned, being a purple belt and you putting him against two black belts, and I think most that have been to your class more than once or twice that they've experienced your method of choosing the right people for that person. And I always Cecil and I, and when we hosted Cecil for his class in Tulsa, we spoke on that exact thing, about how well you team people up for that experience. And yeah, definitely we've been there for certain. On that note, Craig and Mike, if you guys are willing um, to hit on Aaron's question, is there, 3, 4 people, however many you want to mention on your short list inside this realm, who would you recommend? Craig, I'll start with you.
Well, the first guy I would recommend that you go train with is a young guy who didn't come up under me, who's been in my coursework, not a Shivworks guy, but that's Aaron Genetti. I'd go see Aaron. Aaron's 30. He's a generation behind me. He's 20 something years younger than I am. He is original and he is inspired, and he is a better instructor than I was at his age, and he will probably be a better instructor than I am at the age I am now if he stays in it. That kid's the next big thing. I mean, and I don't mean to say that, taking anything away from him now. I'm a very public supporter of his because I think he's original. I think he's inspired. He's also one of the few young people out there who are far more interested in being in doing something versus being somebody. Aaron actually wants to develop a body of work. I would go see him first. I think anything you get from Aaron is going to be well done. I would go see him. He'd be the first guy I would say go see.
Awesome. And I will tell you, I heard you mention him, and I don't know what podcast it was on, but I immediately looked him up, and I've been following what he's been doing. And I'll go on. I mean, like I am one of the coaches in the morning at my jiu-jitsu gym, and just 3 weeks ago, one of his drills, I absolutely, texted him and said, "Hey man, I'm gonna borrow this," and I ran it in class, and he is doing amazing things, and I definitely have him on the top of my list. I'm looking for the opportunity to get in his class for sure, or one of his
It's just,
courses.
and it's not just what he does, it's who he is, and who he is affects a lot of what he does and what he will do. And he is worth getting on with early. He
Nice.
is. He is. I would go see Aaron. There are others, that are not, Shivworks centric. Cliff, obviously, you guys have trained with Cliff.
Phenomenal.
Ben Aubin, like Ben a lot with Redbeard. Ben came up under himself, kind of like me, did his own thing. I think Ben's work is fairly original and fairly inspired. Ben's his own man. He has different opinions than I do, and he does things differently than I do. But you should go see what those are.
Nice. I have him on my short list as well.
Okay.
Cool. Mike, what about you, buddy? You got anybody you want to mention, or?
Yeah, so there's two people, and again, I'll come at this from a slightly different direction than Craig did, because I think that I think what he's describing there, the idea of people who are newer, probably more apt to be, on a similar page to where we're, and far more advanced than we were at that age. Those are phenomenal people to go with, but I'm going to go the other end of things. And I would say that there are some people that have been in this for a long, long time who were doing it at a time when others, didn't recognize the value in this. The two that immediately come to mind is, the very first one, that is a good friend of all of ours, and that's Paul Sharp.
Yeah.
I think Paul is somebody who, for years, has had a far bigger influence on all of the work that all of us have done, and has rarely gotten sufficient credit for the amount that he's really contributed. I remember the first real long conversation I had with Paul about about a particular training problem I was having, and Paul had it solved like I said, in a couple of minutes for me. And so, I mean, I really look at Paul as somebody whose contributions have kind of flown under the radar, despite the fact that all of us here recognize what a real treasure he is to the community. So he would be one. And the other is someone probably a little bit lesser known to the community, but very well known inside other communities, and that's Matt Larson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Matt Larson does not get a whole lot of public play, but Matt Larson has done more to develop, this combatives discipline in the larger organizations of this country, specifically the United States military, than probably anybody. Matt Larson truly, he has truly developed a program that is adopted by, now, how big is our military, our army? Something that everybody has, that it touches everything someone does. And yet he's still out there, trying to figure out how he's going to make this better. I have a good friend of mine whose son was recently appointed to West Point, and during the visit, he mentioned that he saw Matt out on the football field with all these cadets drilling mounted arm bars. Now, regardless of whether that's what we want to be doing or not, the fact that we've got a guy who's been in this long, still out there training the people who will be our country's leaders at some point in this, says a lot for
Absolutely.
what he's trying to, bring to this, which is, in my opinion, is a little bit different than what a lot of other trainers are doing. Not that it's better or worse, it's just different. And, I tend to, be attracted to those unique perspectives on things like that.
Nice, man. Though you guys brought it for certain, and folks on our short list, and the main reason we wanted to ask that question is because I do think it's important that folks in our audience, that if they can't get to a Shivworks class, that they have some other options that are going to be beneficial to them. And man, and Paul's out further west now, so some folks that are on the west can probably look him up. Maybe easier to get to him. But yeah, I mean, Cliff Byerly. We've been saying this for a while, and that's what's so cool about this venture is we met Cliff doing this show because he was a supporter, and Cliff should be a household name also, in my opinion. Same with Paul. I mean, man, I had a blast finally training with Paul. So, man, great recommendations, guys. What, Aaron, what you got?
Well, we're getting about an hour and 15, 16 minutes here. So, we'll just start into some fun stuff so we can wrap it up here in a bit. But,
Yeah, are you saying it wasn't fun already?
Oh, no. It's been fun. Let's
Hard work.
the lighthearted stuff. How about that? Or some red meat stuff here. So, it's been interesting to see, I was going to say earlier, I wouldn't be on social media if it wasn't for my interaction and keeping up with this realm of all of our favorite trainers and friends in this realm. I wouldn't even be on it. So
Same here, man.
But seeing you guys talking about your and I even saw a little commercial for holsters that Craig, you had you've been running the P365 SIG, and I believe Mike, I even saw you say that you've been running that lately. Just
that
curious,
somehow, as has always seemed to happen, Craig and I eventually developed the same answer to whatever it is without discussing each other. Yeah.
So two main topics on this particular topic of gear, but so what led you guys to those? Because all of us that are I can go look in my safe and it's almost 100% Glock, right? One of these days I'll change that, but I'm still pretty happy. But you guys both have been Glock guys, maybe still shoot Glocks, etc. But what led you guys to the SIGs, like you said, to solve some issues or some, just meet what you needed in a carry pistol?
Go ahead, Michael.
For me, it was this has been these last year and a half or so has been the time that my eyes have really started to go.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see iron sights the way I used to. So I really benefit from an optical sight. And at the just much as I always have, my first standard is can I treat this like a lawnmower? Can I chunk this thing around? Am I going to have to worry about it? And for me, the real benefit to the to that XL is the lack of need for a plate to attach the optic to. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you can go get your gun direct milled somewhere, then great. I have some Glocks with some direct mill slides, but then the combination of that, real small size, real high capacity, and then the ability to directly mount an optic to it, I just don't see how that can be beat for what's out there right now.
Cool. How about you, Craig?
Well, first of all, if I had my druthers, I'd be carrying this thing right here,
I knew
right?
you were going to bring some revolver porn at some point. That is beautiful.
Model 27 with real pre-ban ivory. But I can't treat this
But
I can't treat this like a lawnmower. And this is my desktop gun, right? It sits here with my whiskey. I'm the same way, you know. The dot and the whole like Michael, I'm not a fucking nerd, right? And I don't like to tinker with shit. And the whole plate thing is just so off-putting. And the fact that I can undo, yeah, because I'm not good at power or fucking hand tools. That's not my superpower, right? I have to hire people that shit. But if I can like take the plate off and put the dot on and tighten the dot down and go zero it and go, I that's a huge deal. And honestly, when you look at and my three, and I've got 6 or 7 365 XLs with various frames and options and things I've tried. Um, you know, the one I carry is either a Boresight or it's a Wilson. The Wilson's the cheaper one, but I carry the Mag Guts +2 spring and the Tac Dev base pad, which gives me 2 more. So that's 14 rounds in a gun that's arguably half the size of a Glock 19.
Yeah, that's
And I don't
crazy.
see when you look at the XL, and I have vetted. I've got 7 of the Mag Guts magazines, the magazine spring kits, and the Tactive base pads, and I've vetted each magazine at 200 plus rounds, each single magazine with a variety of ammo. A variety of ammo. I've yet to have a failure. I am absolutely confident with carrying that mag spring upgrade, and I just don't see how you can beat it. I mean, when you look at the 2 guns side by side, and plus the proofs of the pudding, it's just an eminently shootable pistol. I think that I don't think there's any comparison between a G48 and a 365 XL. They're not even in the same class as far as shootability and inherent reliability. You know, the 365L uses a full length for its barrel length, a 3.7-inch guide rod, you know, and the 48 uses the smaller guide rod and guide spring, you know. So yeah, I just, I mean, we're in a golden age of concealed carry. I mean, when you can, with the size of the optics, the 407, 507Ks, the 365Ls, and a Filster Enigma. I mean, there's no reason that in board shorts you can't carry a fighting pistol. So I think it's best in class. I really do. And I'm again, everything I use is Glock, and it always has been Glock. I mean, all the T guns are Glock. I demo with Glocks. You know, I've got, I don't know, 14 of them, you know, something like that for student guns and loaner guns and stuff like that. But my personal druthers, that 365 XL, yeah, I can't fucking do it. If they only came out with a sim kit for it, I'm trying to actually talk
Oh
them
yeah. Well,
about
Craig,
gun.
if I could comment two things. One thing, and I think Aaron had a comment on that too. Number one, my house gun is my 43, right? So that was, I was waiting for that pistol for years for that very reason of having a more MP type pistol. But man, the 365, to compare your setup that you just mentioned, 14 rounds versus my 7, and granted, your setup's just a tiny bit bigger, but I've been saying it for a little while. It's like, man, Sig got the 365 correct, and man, it's starting to get towards, it's itching me a little bit to go that route for my house gun and my, and even possibly another carry gun down the realm here. But here's another thing so I took Scott Jedlinski's class here back in October, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Eric, you see who's running a dot now?" And he said, "You see Craig running a dot now?" He's claiming some credit.
I'm still dot agnostic.
I know you said that.
I really am. I'm not dot queer. I'm not, anti-dot. I'm not. I'm dot agnostic. I mean, I'll say the same thing, and I carry a dot on my gun. I'll say the same thing. I don't think a dot, for the vast majority of people who are not looking for trouble in their daily lives, is going to make a significant difference in the kind of gunfight they may find themselves having to respond to. I don't think a dot's going to make that much of a difference for the vast majority of people. I really
Agreed.
don't. Unless, again, your eyes get better. And usually at these, a car length on average away, for the average person that's, going to be selected as a victim for crime, not an active shooter event, maybe, there are all these outliers, but still all. I do like the added capability, though. I like being able to ding a plate, consistently at 50 yards with that little bitty gun.
I like my B8 scores with dots. I'm just
it's
kidding.
Not, so one thing I'll say also about the 365 concept, it's not just the XL, it's the whole FCU system. I mean, once you get one, you want something that goes in your cargo pocket. Well, you pop it out of your XL and you put it in a standard 365. If you want something literally that's duty sized, or is duty ready, put it in a macro and you've got 17 plus one.
Yeah.
That whole FCU ecosystem thing, that's
pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
Especially when the frames are like $60.
Yeah. Very impressive.
And a Wilson, I think, is about $80.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's less than that.
I think they are too, Michael. I think they're Wilson 65 or something like that.
That's what I thought. I think they are. I think they're about $60, $65.
Yeah. Well, then on the dots, it's just timely that we would have you on, and I've been seeing a lot about this too. Now, I know, Craig, that you like the 6 MOA dot, and and follow me here because I've got a few things that I want to tie in here so we don't keep you guys too much longer. But we had Kyle DeFore on a couple of episodes ago, and his statement is he thinks that the 2 MOA is too small, and he said if it was up to him, his students wouldn't be able to have anything but 6 MOA. I'm sure he's semi joking there, but then he brought up the fact that another great shooter is just using the 32 MOA circle.
Yeah, I've seen right about that. I haven't tried it because I don't have 507Ks. I have 407Ks. I haven't tried just the circle. And honestly, I'm not that much of a fucking nerd about it.
Yeah.
That's my place on it too.
I'll just say this, and then we can skip it. But I had a match a few months ago, and I thought my battery was dead in my Holosun. Well, I changed the battery, right? I'm going to take care of this. Then all of a sudden, every time I took my gun out, my dot was off. Every time I draw, my dot was off, and I had to press it on. Long story short, I had the damn battery in backwards. But I was shooting with that big, EOTech system on there, and it was maybe the best match I'd ever shot. I don't know if it's because I didn't care as much. I was like, just screw it, dude. I'm just going to shoot this big dot everywhere, I was just curious. because Ernest Langdon had a video about that today. For some reason, I just came across that. But I understand the non-nerd stuff, guys. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. And look, man, they're going to say we're nerds for punching each other in the face and with guns, right? Everybody's a nerd about something. Our nerdery is just cooler.
Well,
yep.
So that's just all there is to it. But I'm glad there are guys out there who are doing that work and looking at the differences between a dot, a circle, and a circle dot. I'm glad they're doing that.
You said that so convincingly, like you really care.
I don't, but I'm glad it's being done because somebody will benefit from it, right? I'm not that guy, but I'm glad somebody doing the work. Somebody needs to be doing it. I don't want to do it, but somebody needs to.
That's about as well put as I can imagine. I'm glad someone else is doing the work in that because I don't want to.
Well, because, I mean, how about this guy?
The only benefit to a dot really is the fact that I can stick that up in front of my face and still look at the target.
Mm-hmm.
That's if I can do that, the rest of that stuff doesn't mean shit to me.
That's a very good point,
the
Mike.
dot, the shape of it, all that stuff. If I can look at the target and intersperse between it, I'm good.
What's more interesting to me about the prevalence of dots is the conversation now about, if we're going to use Jedlinski's language, 3 focal plane shooting versus single focal plane shooting, and what that does for orthodox marksmanship, and how we've taught post and notch sighting, front sight focus stuff, and the emphasis on that for so long. That's a more interesting conversation to me than the dot itself. What's more interesting is the conversation about what we should be looking at that the dot has forced on people, along with, the best shooters in the world saying, yeah, well, dots or iron, I'm always looking at the fucking target.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a more interesting conversation that the dot, I think, is really kind of brought into the forefront of a lot of people's consciousness, regardless of the technology.
Yeah, because when I say that my eyes have gone, I have been a target-focused shooter for as long as I can remember. I would look at the target and I would just put my front sight between the target and my eyes. And about a year and a half ago, I stopped being able to do that any further than about 7 yards. I used to be able to do that out to about 25, 35 yards with no problem. I stopped, like I said, my eyes just stopped being able to do that. And now with dot, I'm back to being able to do it the way I've always shot.
Yeah, and frankly, Mike, all the discussion, to use Craig's terminology, the nerd discussion, is that's what it's been for both Aaron and I as well. And the reality is, even though maybe back then, Mike, when I was I guess for lack of a better term, a Padawan under you, and Aaron as well, is I think that I discovered that target focus without thinking about it.
I think it's not something I'm not totally convinced that it can be taught. I hear some guys like a Tim Herron and others saying that you can teach it. I don't know that I believe that. I think your eyes either work to do it or they don't. And that's the real benefit of a dot. I think that's the case that Scott Jedlinski makes, this 3 focal point or single focal point, is that the dot makes it so everybody can do it, regardless of how exactly your eyes work. Gabe White has some interesting research on that topic. But again, it's far too, it's far too nerdy for me. I'm not gonna spend that much time on it.
Gabe nerding out, no.
I just basically it's if I can look at the target and put my front sight in front of it, I'm good. And whether that sight is a black post or a fiber optic dot or an electronically projected dot, that's all I care about.
Well said. Well, then let's move on from the gun stuff, and we have two more questions. And Craig, I'm going to ask you this now. For those of us that have accidentally eaten caviar on a cruise ship and think, what the heck is this? Oh, I guess I'll keep chewing on this.
First of all, you don't chew caviar.
Okay, there you go. See, I told you I don't know. Okay, so
embarrassing me.
So
failing to crush it in the upper part of his mouth, huh?
Okay, so then
and
just a real quick schooling.
Are we a part of?
Oh man. So the question is, what makes a good caviar, and what is your favorite? I know that's probably that last part. I know you're going to have all these different scenarios for this and that, but no. So what makes a particular caviar good, and then what is your favorite?
It's firm. It's not squishy or anything like that. It's firm. That makes a good caviar. I like that. The texture of the caviar. That's that to me is the most important quality. That and it's fresh. I mean, it's easy for the show not to be fresh. It's got to be fresh, but it can be fresh and be kind of like mushy. Mm-hmm. So texture. That's what makes a good caviar.
Well, then what would be your favorite or a couple of favorites?
Brand or type, or they're a whole bunch of different.
That's what I was saying. I knew there was going to be some caveats for what.
I will nerd out about caviar.
What's that?
I will nerd out about caviar.
I know. I know. That's what I was thinking when you were talking about.
There's a company called Imperia. I think for the money, especially, they're very accessible for just about anybody that wants to try that. It's very interesting. They have several good caviars, but I like their Sevruga caviar the best.
Nice,
cool. That helps.
I'm gonna have to order some. Yeah, I'm gonna. Very cool. Awesome. One of the things, Mike, that I am so I've been gone from, I guess, it's easy to do the math. 23 going on 24 years I've been away from home. And one of the things that I have still not found, maybe except for a couple of places in Georgia, as far as where I lived, was I miss good barbecue. And again, in the light of just fun topics, man, can you tell me, what your favorite barbecue joint is there in Oklahoma, man? I mean, I'm really curious.
My favorite barbecue joint is not in Oklahoma.
Okay, well, tell us what your favorite
barbecue joint is in Austin, Texas.
I bet you I know.
And I'm betting you're probably going to know the answer, and I'm sure Craig's going to know the answer. And that's one Terry Black's.
Nice.
That is we some friends and I went down there again recently, and I mean I don't know that I've ever had barbecue as good as Terry Black's anywhere.
It's fucking good.
Yeah, I mean it's just there's no place that compares.
Man, I wish I was close that I could get that on a regular basis, man.
Now, Craig, you're in that part of the country nowadays, right? Or making your way there?
No, I'm in Austin right now. Well, not in Austin, Hayes County, because I don't want to get prosecuted in Travis. So
no kidding.
Mike, I just wanted to ask. So, are you a pork guy or a beef guy?
Generally pork.
Okay.
Yeah, generally pork.
Same here.
I like beef too. But as Craig can attest, I like some hot links. That's always going to be my test of how good a barbecue place is how the hot links are.
Well, whenever I make my way down to Austin, I will have to hit that place because
Now that
I'm
said,
sorry.
the Terry Blacks, I am not normally a ribs guy. Ribs are not my favorite type of barbecue, but and certainly not beef ribs. But Terry Blacks makes a beef rib that, I mean, you buy the one rib. It costs a bunch of money to buy the one rib, and it is among the most amazing things I've ever tried. Absolutely amazing.
Awesome.
Well, one of the
I've never
things
had any like it.
what I was going to ask actually, and this brings it up to, Craig's new location. And Mike, I was going to bring this up. Um, I, I I was thinking, man, I know Craig likely moved there mainly because Lauren's there. But I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, man, Craig is picking up his jiu-jitsu game, and he's going to hit up New Wave. Am I correct, or am I just jabbing at you, Craig?
I'm not going to do anything until I heal. I'm still not healed.
Oh yeah, from your injury. That's right.
Yeah, I tore 3 out of 4 tendons attaching my quad
Damn.
to
Yeah.
my pubis symphysis, and I had to have them put back on. And so I am right at 18 weeks now. No, not even that. About 16 weeks out from that surgery. So I'm not going to be realistic. Actually, I went and rolled. I was back in Mississippi here recently. I went and rolled the other day, and I rolled did like 3 5-minute rounds with 2 of the black belts there, and who know me. And I said, do not, knee cutter me on this fucking incision, because I have 2 incisions. I've got one in my groin, and I've got one on my thigh. But I did okay. Just moving around and testing the waters, like, can I hip escape? I'd have them do things like stop, and I'd get a butterfly hook in with my left leg and see how it felt to extend them and test that repair, and everything. And it did okay, but I'm not ready to, I'm not ready to even drill hard right now.
Well, I would tell you, Craig, I
can pull in the squat rack. I can do girl shit. That's about it right now.
well, really, I was just I had thought about it. I was like, man, Craig's in Austin, man, got John Danaher and Gordon Ryan and all that crew there, man. I was thinking, man, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
For certain. But also, because you brought up your injury, I tell you, when you posted that, man, I had to look away. And my wife's like, what's going on? I said, it said, man, Craig posted it. And that was hard to see, brother.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like seeing you being under that, man. But
yeah, I've never lost a barbell in my life. And that was like, it was a bad, I mean, it's a fairly catastrophic structural injury. And I went to the only place in the United States that actually does surgical repairs for that particular injury. So found them. Most of their clients are the NFL. Had to pay cash for it. They don't take insurance.
Oh wow!
But it's well worth it. World class place. I mean, when the day I had my surgery, I was the only person with family there. Every other patient was there with their coach. So
wow.
I mean, it was had like a lineman from the Ravens, had a couple of kids from Villanova, some soccer player, whatever he is, But yeah, I know the rest of the world, soccer's a big deal. It's football. The rest is soccer. So,
yeah, agreed.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, cool.
Well, world class people, world class place. It's just it's going to take a while to I can teach now and demo, and be on the road and not be in pain.
Glad to hear that, buddy.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I will feel so. So I didn't. It's not just the tendons that I tore, but I tore the rectus, the bottom of the rectus abdominis off the bone too. So, yeah.
Wow. And it's one of those things, and I've had this conversation with Mike before. All of us are getting older.
I'm
Aaron and I,
55. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
55.
And what sucks about that is that's still young. But you know what? I remember when you were about to turn 50. Aaron and I are turning 50 this year, and it's, man, time goes by fast. But I'll tell you, it's I had to really face. And I had this conversation with you the last time we hosted you in Washington. But I got to be super selective of who I roll with, and unfortunately, it's just the truth. I prefer to roll with higher belts most of the time, but being that I help now, I'm want to make sure that I'm not denying that time with the folks that I'm coaching, but at the same time, man, I just want to keep going. And my back injury, I still have kinesiophobia. Just every now and then, there's certain movements it's difficult for me to squat heavy now because putting all the spinal compression. So I'm making changes in what I do squat wise. But man, it's just we got to figure out what works for us to continue down the path. So,
Yep.
Well, gents, Aaron, you got anything else?
No, I would just like to thank these guys for helping us on our 100th episode. It's a blast. Like I said at the beginning, we couldn't think of a better way to spend this episode than with you two gentlemen. Huge influences on both of us. Eric first, and then he pulled me kicking and screaming into this fold and changed my life. You guys have changed my life multiple times, and just you guys
Absolutely
spending your time with us is greatly appreciated. So you guys have a good evening. All right.
Thank you much. It was an honor to be here.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Always see you.
Likewise, brother. Likewise. Been too long.
It has been.
All right, guys. See ya.
Thanks.